Valentina Morales never imagined that a simple comment on social media would change her life forever. At 29, she worked as a waitress at Casa Verde, an upscale restaurant in Bogotá's affluent Zona T neighborhood. Every evening, she served meals to business people, tourists, and wealthy Colombian families who enjoyed the white tablecloths and subdued lighting. But as she hurried between tables, Valentina dreamed of a different life, of a world beyond the Andes that surrounded Colombia like a natural fortress, protecting her and imprisoning her at the same time. The restaurant was located in a modern glass and steel building that reflected Bogotá's emerging middle class. The city had changed dramatically over the past 2 decades. The streets of Chapinero and Usaquén were lined with cafes, art galleries, and start-up offices. Young Colombians with university degrees worked in the technology industry, marketing, and international companies. But despite the economic boom, social mobility remained limited. Valentina was one of millions of Colombians who lived between 2 worlds. She saw prosperity every day, but could never really achieve it. Born in Soacha, one of the poorer suburbs south of Bogotá, Valentina, the eldest of 3 siblings, had been forced to contribute to the household income from an early age. Her father, Roberto Morales, worked as a construction worker, and her mother, Luz Marina, worked as a housekeeper in the affluent neighborhoods in the north of the city. Valentina's younger siblings, Camilo and Sofia, were still in school, and the whole family shared a modest 2-room apartment in a concrete building with walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' conversations. Valentina had left school at 16 to earn money. She first worked in a textile factory, then in various shops, until she finally ended up at Casa Verde, where the tips were more generous than elsewhere. She was pretty in a natural, unassuming way. Large, dark eyes, long black hair that she usually tied back in a practical braid, and a smile that seemed genuine even when she was exhausted. The guests liked her because she was attentive without being intrusive, because she spoke English, albeit with a strong accent, and because she exuded a certain dignity that transcended her uniform. But in the quiet moments, when the restaurant was empty between lunch and dinner service, Valentina often sat at one of the tables in the back and scrolled through her phone. Instagram was her escape, her window to a world far away from the narrow streets of Soacha. She followed influencers, models, travel bloggers, people who seemed to stroll effortlessly through Paris, Dubai, New York. She rarely posted herself, but when she did, she chose the pictures carefully. A sunset over Bogotá, a selfie in a pretty dress, a cup of coffee in a stylish cafe. She had 450 followers, mostly friends, former classmates, and a few regulars from the restaurant. It was a Tuesday evening in March when Valentina posted a photo of herself. She was wearing a black dress she had found in a thrift store and had put more effort than usual into her makeup. The photo showed her in front of the mirror in her tiny bathroom. The light was flattering, her gaze confident. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to remind yourself that you are worth more than the world tells you." It was a moment of vulnerability, born out of a difficult day when an unfriendly customer had berated her for taking an order incorrectly. Within hours, the photo received more likes than usual. Most of the comments came from friends encouraging her, but one stood out. The profile belonged to a certain Alexander Whitmore, whose profile picture showed a handsome middle-aged man in an elegant suit. He stood in front of a nighttime city skyline that was clearly New York. His comment was in English. "You are absolutely right. You deserve the world and more." Valentina clicked on his profile. Alexander Whitmore appeared to be a successful businessman. His photos showed him in luxurious restaurants, on yachts, in first-class hotel suites, always perfectly dressed, always confident. His bio line read, "Real estate investor, New York, living the dream I built." He followed over 2,000 people, but had only a few hundred followers himself, which Valentina saw as a sign that he wasn't desperately seeking attention. Most of his photos looked professional, some showing him at business meetings, others in private moments, alone or with friends. Valentina hesitated, then replied, "Thank you. That's very kind." She didn't expect anything more to come of it, but an hour later, she received a direct message from Alexander. "I rarely comment on posts, but something about your words touched me. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I rarely comment on posts, but something about your words touched me. I hope you don't mind me reaching out." Thus began a conversation that would span weeks and eventually months. Alexander wrote to her almost daily, sometimes just short messages, sometimes longer reflections on his life. He said he was 51 years old, divorced with no children. His life had been dominated by work, he said, and although he was financially successful, he often felt lonely. "New York is a city of millions, but it's easy to feel invisible here," he wrote. Valentina understood that. She told him about her life in Bogotá, her family, the long days at the restaurant, her dreams of seeing the world. She was careful about revealing personal details, but Alexander asked questions that sounded thoughtful and respectful. He wanted to know what made her happy, what kept her awake at night, what books she read, what music she listened to. He seemed to have a genuine interest in her as a person, not just as a pretty face on a screen. After 3 weeks of correspondence, Alexander asked if they could video chat. Valentina nervously agreed. One Sunday morning, when her family was visiting relatives and the apartment was empty, she sat down on her bed and opened the app. Alexander's face appeared on the screen, and he looked just like he did in his photos. Grey temples, blue eyes, a charming smile. His accent was American, his voice deep and soothing. They talked for over an hour. He showed her his apartment, a spacious penthouse suite overlooking Central Park. The decor was minimalist but expensive. Large windows, modern artwork on the walls, an open kitchen made of marble and stainless steel. "This is my sanctuary," he said. Valentina felt both fascinated and intimidated. The world Alexander lived in was so far removed from her own that it seemed surreal. In the weeks that followed, the video calls became more frequent. Alexander talked about his failed marriage, which had ended 5 years ago. "We wanted different things," he explained. His ex-wife loved the social life and glamour, while he was looking for something deeper and more authentic. "When I saw your post, something in your eyes told me you understand that feeling, the feeling of wanting more, not in a material sense, but in a meaningful way. When I saw your post, something in your eyes told me that you understand that feeling. The feeling of wanting more, not in a material sense, but in a meaningful way." Valentina felt understood. No one in her life had ever spoken to her like that. Her friends from Soacha dreamed of a steady job, a house of their own, maybe a family. Those were good dreams, practical dreams, but Valentina longed for something bigger, even if she couldn't quite put her finger on what that was. Alexander seemed to recognize this nameless hunger. In May, 2 months after their first contact, Alexander made a suggestion. "I have a business trip to Cartagena next month. I'd love to meet you in person. Maybe we could spend a weekend together, get to know each other without screens between us. Maybe we could spend a weekend together, get to know each other without screens between us." Cartagena was located on the Colombian Caribbean coast, about 1,000 kilometers from Bogotá. It was one of the most beautiful cities in Colombia, with its colonial architecture, colorful houses in the old town, and beaches that attracted tourists from all over the world. Valentina had never been there. The thought of traveling there to meet Alexander in person was both exhilarating and frightening. She talked to her best friend Daniela, who also worked at Casa Verde. Daniela was skeptical. "Valentina, you don't really know this man. What if he's not who he claims to be?" Valentina, you don't really know this man. What if he's not who he claims to be? But Valentina defended Alexander. We talked for hours, Daniela. I've seen his apartment, his friends in photos. He's real. And besides, when will I ever have another chance to see Cartagena? Alexander offered to pay for everything, the flight, the hotel, the meals. I don't want you to worry about money. This is my invitation, my treat. Valentina hesitated, but finally agreed. She asked for a week off from the restaurant, making up a story about a sick relative she needed to visit. The weekend in Cartagena was like a fairy tale. Alexander greeted her at the airport with a bouquet of white roses. He was taller than she had expected, and his presence was impressive, but not intimidating. They spent 2 days exploring the old town, eating at exquisite restaurants, and walking along the beach. Alexander was a perfect gentleman. He held doors open, insisted on carrying her bag, listened attentively when she spoke. They stayed in separate rooms at the Hotel Sofitel Santa Clara, a 5-star resort in a converted 17th-century monastery. On the last evening, as they sat on the hotel terrace watching the sun set over the Caribbean, Alexander took her hand. Valentina, I know this might sound crazy, but I feel something real with you. Something I haven't felt in years. Something I haven't felt in years. His eyes sparkled in the dim light, and Valentina felt her heart beat faster. I feel it too, she replied in Spanish, before repeating it in English. I feel it too. In the weeks after Cartagena, their relationship intensified. Alexander sent her gifts, a new cell phone, a laptop, money for her family. I want to help make your life easier, he wrote. Valentina was overwhelmed by his generosity. No one had ever invested so much in her. Her mother, Luz Marina, was suspicious. Mija, men don't give anything for free. What does he want from you? But Valentina defended Alexander. He's not like the men here, Mama. He's different. He really sees me. In July, Alexander first mentioned that Valentina should visit him in New York. I want to show you my world. I want you to see what life could be like for us, together. I want to show you my world. I want you to see what life could be like for us, together. The thought of traveling to the United States was overwhelming. Valentina had never had a passport, let alone a visa for the US. But Alexander assured her that he would arrange everything. I have connections. I'll make sure everything is taken care of. The process of obtaining a tourist visa was complicated. Valentina had to go to the US Embassy in Bogotá and present documents proving her ties to Colombia, her job, her family, her intention to return. Alexander sent her a letter of invitation, stating that she was visiting him as a friend and that he would cover all expenses. The letter was printed on his company's letterhead, Whitmore Capital Investments, with an address in Manhattan. The interview at the embassy was more tense than Valentina had expected. The consular officer, a young man with a stern expression, asked many questions. How did you meet this man? How long have you known him? Why is he inviting you? What guarantees that you will return to Colombia? Valentina answered as honestly as possible, but she sensed his distrust. Nevertheless, a week later, she received the news. Her visa had been approved, valid for 6 months. Alexander was thrilled. I can't wait to see you here. This is going to be the beginning of something beautiful. He bought her a ticket for early September, a direct flight from Bogotá to New York, JFK. Plan to stay for at least 2 weeks. I want to show you everything. The city, the museums, the restaurants. I want you to fall in love with New York the way I have. Valentina quit her job at Casa Verde. The manager was disappointed, but she made up a story about an opportunity to work abroad. Her family was torn. Her father, Roberto, said little, but his concern was obvious. Camilo, her brother, was jealous. You're always lucky, Valentina. You always get out. Her sister Sofia cried when she heard that Valentina would be gone for 2 weeks. Do you promise you'll come back?" Valentina hugged her tightly. "Of course I'll come back. It's just a visit." The night before her flight, Valentina could hardly sleep. She lay in the narrow bed she shared with Sophia and stared at the ceiling. Her suitcase was packed. A few clothes she had bought for the trip, gifts for Alexander, her most important documents. She had stashed her savings, about $300, in a hidden compartment of her backpack, even though Alexander had said she wouldn't need any money. On the morning of September 5th, her whole family accompanied her to El Dorado Airport. Luz Marina cried and pressed a rosary into Valentina's hand. "May the Virgin protect you, mija." Roberto hugged her stiffly, his eyes moist. "Take care of yourself, Valentina, and call us as soon as you get there." Security was the last barrier. Valentina turned around one last time, waved to her family, then disappeared into the terminal. The flight took 6 hours. Valentina sat by the window, watching Colombia disappear below her, then the Caribbean, then Florida, then up the coast to New York. She thought of Alexander, of his smile, of the promises he had made. She thought of the life she was leaving behind, of the cramped apartment in Soacha, of the endless shifts at the restaurant, of the dreams she had buried in her cell phone. As the plane approached Queens for landing, Valentina saw the Manhattan skyline in the distance, the Empire State Building, One World Trade Center, the bridges connecting the boroughs. She took a deep breath. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "This is my chance." She had no idea that in less than 14 days she would be dead, her body found in a seedy motel in Queens, far from the glittering towers she was now admiring. JFK International Airport greeted Valentina with a chaos of noise, light, and crowds. She had never heard so many different languages at once, never experienced such hustle and bustle. Passport control took over an hour. The officer, a grumpy middle-aged man, leafed through her passport, scrutinized her visa, and asked questions in English that she only half understood. "Purpose of visit?" she asked. "Tourism," she replied nervously. He finally nodded and stamped her passport. Valentina pushed her suitcase through the arrivals hall, her eyes desperately searching for Alexander. He had promised to pick her up, had said he would be carrying a sign with her name on it. But after 20 minutes of searching in vain, panic began to rise within her. She tried to call him, but her cell phone had no reception. She had forgotten to activate international roaming. Finally, she bought a SIM card at a kiosk, her hands shaking as she tried to understand the instructions in English. When her cell phone finally worked, she had 3 missed calls from Alexander and several messages. "Valentina, I'm so sorry. Emergency at work. I sent a car for you. Look for a driver with a sign saying Morales. Valentina, I'm so sorry. Emergency at work. I sent a car for you. Look for a driver with a sign saying Morales." She finally found the driver outside, a burly man with an Eastern European accent who spoke barely any English. He led her to a black sedan, loaded her luggage, and said nothing more. The drive through Queens was disillusioning. Valentina had imagined New York as a glittering metropolis, but what she saw were dilapidated buildings, graffiti, trash on the streets. The traffic was chaotic. After 40 minutes, the car stopped in front of an inconspicuous apartment building in Astoria. "Here," the driver said curtly. Valentina got out, confused. "This is where Alexander lives." The driver shrugged, handed her the suitcase and drove away. Valentina stood alone on the sidewalk, surrounded by her luggage, and felt real fear for the first time. Her cell phone rang. Alexander. "Valentina, I'm so sorry about all this. There's been a complication. That apartment belongs to a friend of mine. You'll stay there tonight and I'll come get you first thing tomorrow morning. The key is under the mat." "Valentina, I'm so sorry about all this. There's been a complication. The apartment belongs to a friend of mine. You'll stay there tonight and I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. The key is under the mat. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building without an elevator. Valentina dragged her suitcase up the stairs, found the key, and opened the door. The apartment smelled musty, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. It was a small studio with a narrow bed, a kitchenette, and a tiny bathroom. It was nothing like the luxurious penthouse Alexander had shown her in their video calls. Valentina sat down on the bed, which creaked under her weight, and began to cry. This was not what she had expected. This was not how her dream trip was supposed to begin. She called her mother, but Luz Marina didn't answer, so she sent a message. "I've arrived. Everything's fine. I love you." A lie, but a necessary one. She tried to reach Alexander again, but he didn't answer. The hours passed slowly. Valentina didn't dare leave the apartment. She was hungry, but the fridge was empty. Finally, she found an old packet of crackers in a cupboard and ate them with tap water. As darkness fell and Alexander still hadn't contacted her, Valentina began to realize that something was fundamentally wrong. She lay awake in the strange bed, listening to the sirens and shouting in the street, and wondered if her mother had been right. Maybe she didn't know Alexander after all. Maybe this was all a terrible mistake. The next morning, after a sleepless night, there was finally a knock at the door. The knocking was loud and impatient. Valentina jumped out of bed, her heart pounding with relief. Alexander was finally there. She opened the door, but the person standing in front of her was not Alexander. A man, perhaps in his mid-30s, with greasy dark hair and a cheap suit, looked her up and down. "Valentina Morales?" he asked with a thick accent. She nodded hesitantly. "I'm Dmitri. Alexander sent me. He can't come today. Business crisis. You're coming with me." Something in his tone made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "Where?" she asked in English. Dmitri didn't smile. "To another place. Better than here. Alexander is waiting there." He reached for her arm, but Valentina pulled away. "I'll call Alexander first." She tried, but his number went straight to voicemail. Dmitri was getting impatient. "Listen, girl, you're here illegally without a work permit. Alexander is in trouble. Do you want to help him or not?" His words didn't make sense, but the implied pressure was clear. Valentina felt trapped. She was in a foreign country, knew no one but Alexander, had hardly any money. "Okay," she whispered finally. "But only if Alexander is there." Dmitri nodded, grabbed her suitcase. "Of course, come on now." The drive took them further away from Manhattan, deeper into Queens, into areas that seemed increasingly desolate. Valentina tried to memorize landmarks, but everything blurred into a grey monotony of warehouses and dilapidated apartment buildings. They stopped in front of a 2-story motel with a faded neon sign, Starlight Inn. Dmitri led her to room 14 on the ground floor. "Alexander will be here in an hour," he said, pressing a key into her hand. "Wait here, don't go anywhere." Then he disappeared. The room smelled of mold and old cigarette smoke. A sagging bed, a stained carpet, a TV that didn't work. Valentina sat down on the edge of the bed, her whole body trembling. She tried to reach Alexander again. This time, someone answered. "Alexander!" Her voice broke, but the voice on the other end was female, cold. "Alexander can't talk right now. You wait where you were told to wait. Understood?" Then the phone was hung up. At that moment, Valentina understood with icy clarity that she had not come to a romantic rendezvous. She had walked into a trap, and Alexander Whitmore, the charming businessman of her dreams, might not even exist. Valentina began to think methodically, despite the panic rising within her. She searched her bag for the note on which she had written down the address of Alexander's supposed office, Whitmore Capital Investments, 432 Park Avenue, Manhattan. She opened Google Maps on her phone. The motel was located in Jamaica, Queens, almost 20 kilometers from Manhattan. She had to get out of here, that was clear. But where to? The Colombian embassy? The police? Both options seemed complicated to her. She was afraid that no one would believe her, that her lack of English skills could be a problem. Worse still, Dimitri's words echoed in her head. "You're here illegally without a work permit." Was she? Her tourist visa was valid after all. She tried to call her best friend Daniela in Bogota, but it was 4 in the morning Colombian time. No one answered. Valentina sent desperate WhatsApp messages. "Daniela, something's wrong. Alexander isn't here. Strange men brought me to a motel. I'm scared." Suddenly, she heard voices outside her door. 2 men were speaking in Russian. Then they switched to English. "She's prettier than in the photos. This will bring in good money." Valentina's blood ran cold. She understood enough to know that they were talking about her as if she were a commodity. She ran to the bathroom, the only room with a door that could be locked. The small window above the toilet was barred, but maybe she could fit through it. With trembling hands, she tried to loosen the bars. They were rusty, but wouldn't budge. A key turned in the lock of the room door. Valentina heard heavy footsteps. "Valentina? Come out. We need to talk." It was Dimitri. She didn't answer. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, girl. Alexander owes certain people money. You're the payment now. The more cooperative you are, the better for you." The truth hit her like a blow. There had never been an Alexander, not the one she knew. The Instagram profile, the photos, the video calls from the luxurious apartment. It had all been staged. She had been lured to New York to be sold. Dimitri hammered on the bathroom door. "You have 10 seconds. Valentina grabbed the hairdryer, the only thing that looked like a weapon. She knew it was ridiculous, but she wasn't going to give up without a fight. The door splintered open. Dimitri filled the doorway, a second man behind him, tall and tattooed. "Stupid girl," Dimitri said, shaking his head. He stepped toward her. Valentina swung the hairdryer, hitting him on the temple. He stumbled back, more surprised than hurt. That gave her the second she needed. She ran past him, across the room to the front door. She made it out into the bright daylight, her feet carrying her across the cracked parking lot. She heard shouts behind her, heavy footsteps. The motel was on a busy road. Cars raced by. Valentina ran toward the street, waving desperately. A taxi braked sharply. She threw open the door and threw herself into the back seat. "Police! Please, to the police!" The driver, an elderly Sikh man wearing a turban, looked at her in the rearview mirror, then saw the 2 men running toward the taxi. He stepped on the gas pedal. The taxi driver spoke quickly in Punjabi into his cell phone as he navigated through the heavy traffic. Valentina looked through the rear window to see if they were being followed. Her whole body was shaking, adrenaline pumping through her veins. "Miss, are you hurt?" the driver asked with a thick accent. She shook her head, though she wasn't sure. "I'll take you to the police station in Forest Hills," he said. "It's not far from here." "What happened?" Valentina tried to explain, but her words came out jumbled, a mixture of English and Spanish. The driver nodded understandingly. "I have a daughter your age. You're safe now." But safety was relative. Valentina's cell phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "Stupid decision. We know your passport. We know where your family lives in Bogota. Soacha, Cali 18, number 42, right? You come back or they pay." Ice-cold fear ran through her. They knew her family's address. The threat was real. Valentina stared at the message, her hands sweaty. Should she really go to the police? What if these men took revenge on her family? "Miss, we're here," said the driver. The police station was an inconspicuous red brick building. Valentina hesitated. "How much do I owe you?" The driver shook his head. "Nothing. Go. Tell them everything." She got out and stood in front of the entrance. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to hide, not to attract the attention of the authorities. But where should she go? She had no place to go, no friends here, hardly any money. Valentina took a deep breath and entered the station. A bored officer sat behind a plexiglass shield. Yes? He barely looked up from his computer. I need help, Valentina began. I was kidnapped, threatened. Men tried to... Her voice failed her. The officer now looked at her properly. Okay, calm down. Sit down. Do you speak English? She nodded. A little. He sighed and reached for the phone. I'll get someone who speaks Spanish. 20 minutes passed. Valentina sat on a hard plastic bench, surrounded by people with their own problems. Finally, a policewoman arrived, Detective Maria Santos, a Latina in her late 40s. Come with me, she said in Spanish. Tell me what happened. In a small interrogation room, everything came pouring out of Valentina. She told her about Alexander, about the months online, about Cartagena, about her arrival in New York, about Dmitri, about the motel, about the threat against her family. Detective Santos took notes, her face growing more serious with every minute. This is a classic case of human trafficking, she finally said. You're not the first. These networks are organized, international. They use social media to identify victims. She put a hand on Valentina's arm. You did the right thing coming here. But then came the difficult question. Do you have any evidence? Messages, photos, addresses? Valentina nodded eagerly, showing her phone, the Instagram conversations, the messages. Detective Santos studied them. That Alexander profile was probably deleted or deactivated as soon as you landed, but we have enough to start an investigation. She explained the next step. Valentina would be placed in a protected women's shelter. The police would search the motel, looking for Dmitri and his accomplices. And my family? Valentina asked desperately. In Colombia? Detective Santos became serious. We'll contact the Colombian authorities. Give me the address. We'll make sure your family is protected. For the first time since her arrival, Valentina felt a spark of hope. But the relief was short-lived. Her cell phone vibrated again. Another message, this time with a photo. Her mother, taken through a window of her apartment in Swatcha, unaware that she was being photographed while cooking. Below it were just 3 words. We see her. Valentina showed Detective Santos the photo with trembling hands. The policewoman cursed softly in Spanish. This changes everything. These people are more dangerous than I thought. We have to take you into protective custody immediately. She reached for her radio, but Valentina stopped her. No, wait. If I stay here, they'll kill my mother. You know that. Her voice was calmer now, cold with determination. I have to go back to them. I have to pretend to cooperate. It's the only way to buy time. Detective Santos shook his head vigorously. Absolutely not. If you go back there, we'll never see you again. These men treat people like cattle. They have no scruples. But Valentina had already made up her mind. Then give me a listening device. Follow me. But I have to go before they hurt my family. After a heated discussion, Santos reluctantly agreed. Within an hour, Valentina was equipped with a tiny GPS tracker sewn into the hem of her bra and a microphone disguised as a button on her blouse. We'll be within earshot every second, Santos assured her. At the slightest sign of danger, we'll rush in. Valentina called back the number that had sent her the threat. Dmitri answered. I'm coming back, she said firmly. But you leave my family alone. That's the deal. Dmitri laughed. You're not in a position to make deals, sweetheart, but okay. Come back to the motel, alone. If we see the police, your mother will be dead before you can blink. The ride back to the Starlight Inn was in an unmarked police car, which dropped Valentina off 3 blocks away. She walked the rest of the way, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it could be heard on the street. The September sun was low, bathing everything in orange light. Dmitri was waiting for her in front of room 14, smoking, relaxed. Good girl, you changed your mind. He led her inside. Inside, 2 other men she didn't know were waiting. One was older, maybe 50, with ice-grey hair and expensive clothes. He eyed Valentina like a buyer at a market. "She's pretty," he said to Dmitri in English, "but she's caused problems. That lowers her value." Dmitri shrugged. "She'll learn. They've all learned." The older man stepped closer to Valentina. "What's your name?" She didn't answer right away. He slapped her face, not hard, but humiliatingly. "I asked what your name is." "Valentina," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Detective Santos's voice would record all of this. She had to hold on. "Valentina from Colombia. You're going to Atlantic City to work for me. Understood?" She nodded silently. The man pulled out a wad of cash and counted it out for Dmitri. 5,000 now! 5,000 when she gets to the club! Valentina felt sick. She had just been sold for $10,000. Dmitri took the money and grinned. "Always a pleasure doing business with you, Victor." Victor grabbed Valentina's arm, his grip iron-like. "Come on, my car is waiting." At that moment, the police should have intervened, but nothing happened. No sirens, no officers rushing in. Valentina felt panic rising. Had they lost the signal? Was the microphone defective? Victor dragged her to the door. Outside, a black SUV was waiting with the engine running. "Get in," he ordered. Valentina glanced desperately up and down the street. Where was Detective Santos? Where was the cavalry? Then finally the screech of tires. 3 police cars raced into the parking lot, blocking the exit. "NYPD! Hands up! Nobody move!" Victor cursed in Russian, let go of Valentina, and reached into his jacket. The mistake he made was to hesitate. Police officers jumped out of their vehicles, guns drawn. What should have ended as a controlled arrest escalated in seconds. One of Dmitri's men drew a gun. A shot rang out, then several more. Valentina threw herself to the ground, covering her head. The chaos lasted maybe 20 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When silence returned, Valentina heard Detective Santos's voice. "Valentina, are you hurt?" She lifted her head. Dmitri was lying on the ground, bleeding but alive, handcuffed by police officers. Victor was pressed against the SUV, also handcuffed. The third man lay motionless on the asphalt. Valentina began to shake uncontrollably. Santos helped her up and hugged her tightly. "It's over. You're safe. Your family is safe. We've alerted the Colombian police. They're already with your mother." But it wasn't over. Not really. The story that would dominate the headlines in the days that followed told a different version. Colombian garçonette found dead in Queen's motel, because the news editors didn't have the whole story. What they had was a body found 3 days later in a similar motel, another young woman, also from Colombia, who hadn't been as lucky as Valentina, whose family hadn't been warned in time, who hadn't met Detective Santos. Valentina survived. But every day, while she waited in a protection program for her return to Colombia, she read about the others who hadn't made it, and she knew her name could just as easily have been in those headlines.